How much does Richtofen really know about the original timeline? Because as I'm sure many of you guys know, the Dark Aether timeline is a hard reboot of the original Aether timeline. I mean, we literally saw this happen in the final map of Aether with Toten. Nikolai banishes all corruption to the Dark Aether and resets the timeline for everything except 2 characters. Only 2 characters make a walk through the abyss into this new timeline. Those, of course, being Samantha Maxis and Eddie Richtofen. Now, I already know you guys are going to love what we're going to be going over in this video, so do what 96% of you guys haven't done yet and subscribe and even drop a like. Now, what's interesting about these 2 characters is that initially you would think Samantha should remember more about the original timeline than Eddie. I mean, this is Samantha that went through everything from World at War to Black Ops 4. She should know all of that. But what we actually learned throughout the events of Cold War is that she seems to be suppressing those memories, trying to forget them, because we heard in some intel in that game that she doesn't remember any of her childhood. So as of now, possibly Eddie Richtofen is the only one that remembers anything of the original timeline. But the question is, what does he know? Because you have to keep in mind, Eddie Richtofen is not Primus Richtofen, he's not Ultimis Richtofen, he's not even Richtofen 1.0. His story is a bit more dark, and it has to do with what we were doing during Black Ops 3. If you guys remember, we were going through all the different characters, killing the 1.0 versions of them, collecting their innocent souls, and then we sent them up to the house by Garad Krovi. But Richtofen's soul was different. Initially, a lot of people thought it's what happened in the intro to the Giant, but later we learned that Primus Richtofen, in his journey for finding an innocent version of his soul, found that the only way he could find an innocent soul of him was when he was a child. And this is the story of Dimension 2210. The only place Richtofen ever found an innocent version of himself, and you guys probably could guess what happened there. But for now, all you need to know is that Richtofen did successfully collect his soul, and then he sent it up to the house with Samantha, Dr. Maxis, and Dr. Monty. So already we could eliminate the possibility that he really knows anything about the original timeline with previous memories before he was sent up to the house, because he was a child before that, before anything ever happened. Now, the other possibility you could learn about is that maybe someone in the house told him something. Samantha could have, Maxis, and even especially Dr. Monty. Now, maybe that happened, but honestly, I find it a little bit doubtful, because he is supposed to be the innocent version of him, so why tell him about this corruption? Now, we do know to an extent he knew something, because of what we saw in the Origins cutscene where they're playing with all the zombies from different timelines and some of the characters, which is all very interesting. So we at least know he knew something, but we don't know how in depth, if it was just playful or if he actually knew everything. But like I said, I don't think he knew everything because they were trying to keep him innocent. But of course, he did have possibilities of learning more about the story as the story continued, because if you guys remember, the story kind of splits off from the original Black Ops 3 story into the Black Ops 4 story where they break the cycle. The other 3 characters never got their child versions sent up to the house, so Eddie never really met them. And instead of getting what we saw in Garad Krovi and Revelations, we got what happened in Alpha Omega, where Dr. Maxis rushes Samantha and Eddie into the teleporter and teleports them away, but before he does, they get to witness Dr. Monty killed Dr. Maxis, which is not a great sight for Eddie. But regardless, when he is teleported to meet both Primus and Ultimis, and from there they travel to the Frozen Forest to hide from Dr. Monty. Now here, of course, he can learn more about the original timeline. He can learn from Ultimis and Primus if they talk to him. But again, it could be a situation where they were trying to keep him away from all of that, but we just don't know. Now, of course, it stays dark for Eddie because then he had a chance to possibly see Primus Nikolai poison Ultimis and Primus, which was probably not a great sight. But then after that, Nikolai had Samantha shoot him, which is also a thing. And after this is when he enters into the new timeline. So really, if you think about it, anything Eddie really heard about the original timeline all had to be secondhand. He didn't experience any of it. And the problem is that we really don't know what he could have been told by anybody. They could have kept him in silence the whole time. They could have told him some romanticized version of everything they went through. Or it could just be they straight up told him everything they went through straight up. We just don't know. And that's why it all leaves us at a weird spot. What does Eddie really know about the original timeline? Because I think he really needs to know something. And the reason I say this is because if he didn't know anything, why would he be the main driving force trying to bring the dark ether back into the perfect timeline, or what was supposed to be the perfect timeline made by Nikolai? Why is he ruining everything that Nikolai did? And I know a lot of people's explanation could just be that, hey, maybe he just doesn't really know. He's just ignorant of how bad everything really was in the original timeline, and he doesn't understand why Nikolai sacrificed everything for that. And maybe he was told romanticized versions of everything that happened then, and now he's just trying to return to that, or something like that. And that very may be possible, but honestly, I think it's something more here. And I had this theory that I've been wanting to share for a while now, and that's exactly what we're going to do now. And all this revolves around both Eddie and Ultimis Richtofen. Now, if I bring you guys back to Alpha Omega, there was a lot of conversational codes between a lot of the characters, and Ultimis Richtofen was acting very suspicious, like he had something up his sleeves. He was going to do something, and he kept saying it, and everyone was very suspicious of him. And then comes Richtofen, and again, now we have even Primus Richtofen suspecting Ultimis Richtofen being up to something. And I mean, can you blame everybody? This guy has been the definition of conniving, right? He's been doing this forever, ever since he was introduced to the story. He's a narcissist and wants absolute power. He also said that in Tog. He says, I simply just want absolute power. And then we finally get the outro cutscene to Tog Richtofen, and we finally think we're going to see that twist. Finally, what did he do? What is he doing to betray everything? How is he going to ruin everything this time? And we see him become the zombified version of himself. But yet, all that happens is that Nikolai just kills him again. Nothing of substance again. It's just that. And it makes no sense for this character because, as we already went over, he's a narcissist. He wants absolute power, but now he's just accepting his fate and just turned into a zombified version of himself for fun, I guess? Like, what was the point of that? He just wanted to die twice? It's just confusing, and it never made sense to me back then when we got that cutscene, and it doesn't make sense now. Or at least, initially, it doesn't. But what if there was a reason why Ultimis Richtofen had to become a zombie form of him? Maybe he saw no other way to continue as his current self, but he found a way in a different version of himself to continue what he's wanted to do ever since we first met him. And this is where my theory comes into place. I think that some way Ultimis Richtofen needed to become a zombified version to give a part of his soul, or just some part of him, to the younger version of himself in Eddie, thus turning what was supposed to be the innocent version of Richtofen, free of all corruption, back to being at least slightly corrupted again. And I mean, doesn't it make sense? Let's say Eddie, that's now going as fully Edward Richtofen in the Dark Ether timeline, let's say he's mainly innocent, and he was mainly innocent, and he lived a normal life like it was supposed to happen. But then something traumatic, potentially the loss of a child and a wife. That may have reawoken the corruption that Ultimis Richtofen instilled in him, and ever since then, he's been on this journey to bring it all back, to try to gain absolute power, return to his narcissistic state. What if that is what's happening here? That through Eddie, a small part of Ultimis Richtofen continues to live on. And I know this sounds a bit crazy, but this is what zombies is. And really, there's only one last thing I could leave you all on. The final quote we ever heard from Ultimis Richtofen and the Forsaken.
I know you'll probably never really trust me, and even now, you'll be expecting me to pull some last-minute rabbit out of a hat. A big rabbit of betrayal.
Yeah, no kidding.
Thank you, Dennis. I knew I could rely on you. So, do you have a rabbit of betrayal? If I'm honest, I've been expecting one since we all got together. Sadly, no. I am all out of rabbits.
As the old Dark Ether saying goes, You're all out of rabbits.